Hi, and welcome to the second video of Trinity Youth for Racial Equity Audiovisual Project. My name is Margarita, Refugia, Alvord.
Hi, I'm Taylor, Aglipay.
And today we're going to talk to you a little bit more, diving into the definitions of race and racial equity. Oftentimes, in talking about race, conversations can become confusing because people are using the same terms in different ways. One way to communicate effectively about race is to steer away from narrow and individualized definitions of racism and move towards more comprehensive and systemic awareness.
This can be very difficult. It's hard to talk about race because it can be a very emotional subject. A lot of hurt and pain and suffering has happened throughout history because of race. But in order to solve these problems, we have to be able to talk about them.
Our goal in this project is really just to inspire conversations about race and racial equity with our youth, break the taboo, and make talking about race okay. The following are definitions of core concepts that can help us with these conversations. Race. What is race?
We are all the same species. We are all human beings. Race is referring to your physical appearance as a human being, right? The way that you look, the color of your hair, the texture of your hair, the color of your skin, the color of your eyes, the color and the shape of your eyes and your other facial features, how tall you are, those sorts of things. It's basically what makes human life beautiful. If we all looked exactly the same, life would be very, very weird. So, race is referring to your physical appearance or how you look. It's different from ethnicity. Ethnicity is talking about your culture, what language you speak, what kind of foods you eat, what you do for fun, what religion you practice, that sort of thing. The problem arose when we started to categorize people based on race or how they look.
For many people, it comes as a surprise that racial categorization schemes were invented by scientists to support worldviews that viewed some groups of people as superior and some as inferior.
It was basically a way that some people throughout history have been able to justify colonizing and enslaving other human beings. They would say, oh, that person looks different than me. Therefore, they are a different racial categorization. They're a different race. So it's okay for me to oppress them. It was just a way that they could justify it somehow.
There are three important concepts linked to this fact. 1. Race is a made-up social construct and not a biological fact.
The only biological fact is that we're all human beings and we all look different.
2. Race designations have changed over time. Some groups that are considered white in the United States today were considered non-white in previous eras, in U.S. Census data and in mass media and popular culture. For example, Irish, Italian, and Jewish people. 3. The way in which racial categorizations are enforced, the shape of racism, has also changed over time. For example, the racial designation of Asian American and Pacific Islanders have changed 4 different times in the 19th century. That is, they were defined at times as white and at other times as non-white. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, as designated groups, have been used by whites at different times in history to compete with African American labor.
So that can definitely be seen in Trinity County, where instead of African slaves, the use of Chinese labor during the gold rush was quite common. We still have the Joss House Taoist Temple in Weaverville to remind us of that history. But we also have to acknowledge the concept of racial identity. Some people may choose to identify with a group of people based on how they look, based on their race. And that's fine. Me personally, I would not choose to identify as a white man, although I certainly get to enjoy all the privileges of being one. I would prefer to identify as a man from the western United States whose ancestors came from Scotland, Ireland, and the Philippines. But That's because I'm lucky enough to know that my ancestors came from Scotland, Ireland, and the Philippines. I'm able to trace my family tree back that far. Some people aren't that lucky. They may not be able to trace their family ancestry back that far because of the slave trade or colonization or something like that. So they may choose to identify simply as black or as Latino or as white or whatever the particular racial group may be. And that's fine. So that's the concept of racial identity. Some people just choose to identify with a group of people based on their race or how they look. And that's perfectly fine. So what is the definition of equity?
Equity is defined as the state, quality, or ideal of being just, impartial, and fair. The concept of equity is synonymous with fairness and justice. It is helpful to think of equity as not simply a desired state of affairs or a lofty value. To be achieved and sustained, equity needs to be thought of as a structural and systemic concept.
Okay, so when we're talking about racial equity, we're talking about making it fair for everyone, no matter what you look like. If the definition of race is what you look like, and the definition of equity is making it fair and just for everyone, then the topic of racial equity, which is what we're wanting you to make a haiku or an original piece of artwork about, the topic of racial equity is making it fair for everyone, no matter what you look like.
Equity versus equality. Equity involves trying to understand and give people what they need to enjoy full, healthy lives. Equality, in contrast, aims to ensure that everyone gets the same things in order to enjoy full, healthy lives. Like equity, equality aims to promote fairness and justice, but it can only work with everyone starting from the same place and everyone needing the same things.
I can definitely see how some people can get racial equity and racial equality confused. For one, the two words kind of sound similar. And for years, people have been struggling just to get equal rights for everyone. The right to vote, the right to an attorney and a fair trial, instead of just being killed by the police, etc. So I understand the confusion. Equality would be giving everyone the same exact thing, and equity is giving everyone what they need to survive and flourish in life.
Here's an example of the difference between equality and equity. Sally falls down and hurts her knee and is bleeding and needs a Band-Aid. And so Miss Smith, she's not going to give every student in the classroom a Band-Aid because it's only Sally that needs the Band-Aid. It's not necessarily equal, but it's fair and it's just.
Right. What if Sally skinned her knee because Jack pushed her over trying to get to the basketball first? It's not Sally's fault that she skinned her knee, but we still need to address the fact that her knee is bleeding and give her the Band-Aid. Jack doesn't need a Band-Aid because he's not bleeding and he's got the basketball. So what is institutional racism?
Institutional racism refers specifically to the ways in which institutional policies and practices create different outcomes for different racial groups. The institutional policies may never mention any racial group, but their effect is to create advantages for whites and oppression and disadvantage for people from groups classified as people of color. One example is government policies that explicitly restricted the ability of people to get loans to buy or improve their homes in neighborhoods with high concentrations of African Americans. This is also known as redlining. Basically, the government grabbed a map of the city, found out where all the African Americans or the majority of African Americans were living, grabbed a red marker and drew a line around those neighborhoods. And they made it difficult for these groups of people to have advantages. Hi. So, in a red line district, you could never ever dream of getting produce this good. The nutrition value of the substances that you would find in a red line district is very low. Most of the foods are packaged, and most of the stores are liquor stores with candy and foods with high and partially hydrogenated oils. That's just one example of the disadvantage that people have in a red light district. Another example is city sanitation department policies that concentrate transfer stations and other environmental hazards disproportionately in communities of color.
In Flint, Michigan, an area near Detroit that was predominantly minorities, where the water district decided to try to save some money, which resulted in the drinking water for thousands of people becoming contaminated with lead and other toxic chemicals, which created a massive public health crisis. A bunch of people got sick and died, and it took years for them to finally solve the problem.
You can imagine, for years, many of these people grew up with disadvantages. So not everyone is starting from the same place.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race! Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go!
We hope that these definitions and concepts help you to have conversations with your students about race and why racial equity matters. Thank you so much for participating in this audiovisual project with us. We look forward to seeing the work that you create.
We've also provided some worksheets to your teachers which may assist you in the creation of your haiku or your piece of artwork based on the topic of racial equity. We so much look forward to seeing your artwork and reading your haikus and writing this original song and creating this music video with you. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.